Story 1. The Credit Thief. You won't believe what happened to a software engineer named Marcus. A man who spent 18 months building something extraordinary, only to watch his boss stand up in front of the entire company and take a bow for work he had never touched. Marcus had joined a mid-sized tech firm with big ambitions and even bigger promises. His manager, a man we'll call Director Hargrove, was the sort of leader who wore expensive suits, spoke in buzzwords, and had mastered the ancient corporate art of appearing indispensable while doing absolutely nothing. He attended every meeting, nodded with authority, and typed furiously on his laptop, which, as it turned out, was mostly emails about golf. Marcus, meanwhile, was the one quietly doing the work. For a year and a half, he designed and built an internal analytics platform from scratch, a tool that would save the company an estimated $400,000 annually in operational costs. He worked late nights, he skipped holidays, he solved problems no one else in the department could even articulate. And through it all, he kept Hargrove vaguely informed, the way you'd update someone who needed to feel included but wouldn't understand the details. Then came the annual all-hands meeting, the company's showcase moment where leaders presented their team's achievements to the board of directors, the executive team, and the entire organization. Marcus wasn't presenting, Hargrove was. And when Hargrove stood up at that podium and said, "I developed a solution that will transform our operations, not my team, not Marcus, just I," something cold and resolute settled in Marcus's chest. He had suspected this might happen, which is why, for the past 6 months, he had been quietly preparing. Every email, every commit log with his name and timestamp, every design document, every Slack message where he explained the architecture to Hargrove in plain English, every project management entry where he was listed as sole contributor. He had compiled all of it into a single, meticulously organized document, 43 pages, backed up to personal storage, printed and sitting in a folder in his bag. He had also, very casually, let it slip to one of the board members 2 weeks prior, during a chance encounter in the lift, that he was the engineer behind the new analytics platform and would love the chance to walk someone through the technical details sometime. The board member had been very interested indeed, so when Hargrove finished his presentation and the polite applause died down, the board member raised his hand. He had a few technical questions. Could the developer perhaps speak to those directly? Hargrove smiled and said he'd be happy to answer anything. And then the questions came. Deep architectural technical questions. Questions about the specific decisions behind the database schema. Questions about why Marcus had chosen a particular API structure over a more conventional approach. Questions that had one correct answer, the real story behind each choice. And Hargrove had none of them. The silence stretched out like a held breath. Marcus stood up. Calmly, professionally, he said he'd be glad to help clarify, since he was the one who built it. And then, without a trace of malice, he walked the board through the entire system, answering every question with quiet, confident precision. After the meeting, the HR investigation lasted 2 weeks. Hargrove was gone before the month was out. Marcus was promoted into the role. Here's what Marcus understood that Hargrove never did. Credit is not a finite resource to be hoarded. Leaders who steal shine from the people beneath them are not climbing, they are digging, and eventually the ground gives way. Story 2. The Saboteur. Now, not every betrayal comes from above. Sometimes it comes from the person sitting right beside you. You won't believe what happened to a woman named Claire. At a marketing agency where competition for promotion was fierce, the politics were vicious, and one of her colleagues had decided that the fastest way to the top was to push someone else off the ladder. Claire and a man we'll call Daniel had joined the agency in the same cohort. They had the same job title, the same ambitions, and, at least on the surface, a collegial, even friendly relationship. They had lunch together. They bounced ideas off each other. Claire, trusting and collaborative by nature, had made the mistake of sharing early drafts of her biggest pitch yet, a campaign proposal for the agency's most lucrative client, thinking they were simply brainstorming together. Daniel was listening very carefully, and not for the reasons she thought. The day before Claire's presentation to the senior partners, her laptop froze. The file she needed had developed an inexplicable corruption. The backup on the shared drive had been overwritten, not by Claire. The print copies she'd left on her desk had vanished. She spent most of the night rebuilding from memory, hollow with panic, certain something had gone wrong, but not yet understanding just how wrong. She delivered her presentation tired, rattled, and working from a version that was a pale shadow of what she'd prepared. It didn't land. The partners were underwhelmed. 2 weeks later, Daniel presented RC, and his pitch was remarkable, precise, polished, full of ideas that sounded to Claire's ears remarkably familiar, because they were hers. She didn't explode. She didn't accuse. She started paying attention. It turned out Daniel had made one critical error. He was careless about his digital footprint. When the agency's IT department ran a routine audit, prompted by an unrelated security concern, they discovered that someone had accessed the shared drive from Daniel's credentials, overwritten Claire's backup, and accessed her project folder multiple times in the week before her presentation. The audit had not been Claire's idea, but she had quietly raised a concern about suspicious file activity to IT 3 days after her presentation went poorly. She'd framed it as a general question about version control. She hadn't accused anyone. She'd simply asked whether there was any way to check who had touched certain files. It found everything. Daniel was confronted. He denied it. The logs did not. He was dismissed for gross misconduct. His supposed pitch, built on stolen architecture, was quietly shelved. Claire was asked to rebuild her original proposal and redeliver it. She did. And it was everything it had always been, brilliant, original, and entirely her own. The senior partners gave her the lead on the campaign. What Daniel failed to grasp is something every saboteur eventually learns. When you build your success on someone else's foundation, you build it on sand. And the tide, one way or another, always comes in. The workplace can be a battlefield, but the ones who fight with integrity, who document, who stay calm, who let the evidence do the shouting, they are the ones left standing when the dust settles. That's the Karma Army. We see the long game, and the long game always wins. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell, because there is always more justice on the way.